For 10 years, I thanked God for my marriage. I thanked Him every morning when Rosalie was still asleep beside me, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her breathing slow and even. I thanked Him for choosing me, for giving me a woman like her, for letting me be the man she loved. I was so busy being grateful that I never once asked if any of it was real. Before I tell you the moment my entire life fell apart, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And subscribe if you believe the truth always comes out. My name is Sterling. I am 45 years old, and for a decade, I prayed for a child that my wife was secretly making sure would never exist. This is not a story about hatred. I want you to understand that from the beginning, what Rosalie did was not the work of a monster. It was the work of a woman so consumed by fear that she chose to bury me in a lie, rather than risk losing the love she'd built on top of it. That distinction matters. It doesn't change what she took from me, but it changes what this story is. It was a Saturday in late October when everything ended. Rosalie was packing for a girls' weekend upstate, suitcase open on the bed, music low in the kitchen, the apartment smelling like the candle she always lit when she was in a good mood. She called out from the bedroom, casual as anything, "Honey, can you grab my toiletry bag from the bathroom? Blue zipper under the sink." I found it immediately. I unzipped it to make sure it was the right one. She had two. And that's when I saw it. A blister pack of pills tucked between her toothbrush and her concealer. Half the slots punched through. I didn't recognize it. I turned the pack over, found the label, and typed the name into my phone. Levonorgestrel and ethinyl estradiol tablets. Oral contraceptive. Birth control. I read the words 3 times. Then I set the bag down on the edge of the sink very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands have stopped working. And then I sat down on the bathroom floor. I didn't move for a long time. What came back to me first was not rage. It wasn't even grief. It was a Tuesday afternoon 4 years earlier. A specialist's office with gray carpet and framed anatomy prints on the wall. A doctor explaining, with rehearsed gentleness, that our latest round of fertility treatment had not produced the result we'd hoped for. Rosalie had been sitting beside me. She had reached over and gripped my hand. She had wept. I had held her in that office and believed, with everything I was, that she was carrying the same grief I was carrying. The same hollow ache. The same desperate longing. I zipped the bag closed, I carried it to the bedroom doorway, and handed it to her with a smile I have never been able to fully explain. Even now, I don't know where it came from. Some automatic part of me that understood, before my mind had fully caught up, that this was not the moment. "Thanks, babe," she said. I watched her finish packing. I kissed her goodbye at the door. I stood at the window and watched the car pull away. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and didn't move for 2 hours. I did not call her that night. I did not call her the next morning. I went to work on Monday with a face that apparently gave nothing away, because not a single person asked me if I was all right. The decision not to confront her immediately was not a strategic one. Not at first. It came from something simpler and more painful. The understanding that I did not yet know the full shape of what I was inside. I needed to know everything before I said a single word. Over the following weeks, I pulled prescription histories. I contacted our health insurance provider under the pretense of a billing query and quietly confirmed what I already suspected. Rosalie had been filling a birth control prescription continuously, without interruption, for 9 years and 7 months. We had been married for 10. One receipt stopped me cold. It was dated 11 days after our 3rd failed fertility treatment. The one where she had sat beside the specialist and asked very quietly whether there was anything else we could try. The doctor had listed options. Rosalie had taken notes. 11 days later, she had refilled her prescription. I filed that receipt with the others. I closed the folder. I went to the kitchen and made dinner and sat across from her at the table we had chosen together at a market in Brooklyn 3 years ago, and I watched her talk about her day. She was beautiful. She was warm. She laughed at something she'd seen on her phone and turned the screen toward me, and I laughed too. I don't know how I did that, I genuinely don't, but I did. There is a particular kind of pain that comes not from being betrayed by someone cruel, but by someone who loved you. Cruelty you can armor yourself against, you can call it what it is, you can let yourself be angry, and anger is clean. It burns bright, and it gives you something to hold. But Rosalie was not cruel. That was the thing I kept returning to in those weeks of silence. In every other dimension of our marriage, she had been a devoted, attentive, genuinely loving partner. She remembered the name of my childhood dog. She called my mother on her birthday without being reminded. She had driven 4 hours in a February snowstorm to be beside me when my father had his first cardiac episode. She loved me. I have never doubted that. And she had still stolen 10 years of my life. I began to understand, through those weeks of carrying the knowledge alone, that those two things were not contradictions. A person can love you completely and still destroy you. A person can be terrified of losing you and still take something from me that can never be returned. What she had taken from me was not just the children we didn't have. It was the choices I never got to make. The conversations I never got to have. The version of my future that I had the right to choose. With full knowledge, with honesty, with my eyes open. She had decided alone that I didn't get to choose. That is what I kept coming back to. Not the lie itself, the decision behind it. She had looked at me, on the day we met, on the day we married, on every day in between, and made a choice for both of us without ever giving me the chance to choose for myself. There were nights when I almost walked into the bedroom and simply asked her. Not in anger, just quietly, the way you ask someone you love a question you've been afraid of. I came close twice. Both times I stopped myself at the threshold, not because I was building toward something, not because I was calculating revenge, because I needed her to have no way out of the truth. I needed the moment of reckoning to be airtight. I needed her to look at everything I had found and understand, completely, that there was nothing left to hide behind. I owed myself that much. We had booked a table at a restaurant in the West Village that we'd been trying to get into for years. Small, candlelit, the kind of place that feels like a secret even when it's full. Rosalie wore the navy dress she bought for our 5th anniversary and never found another occasion for. She looked beautiful. She always looked beautiful. She'd had her hair done that afternoon and she was glowing with the easy happiness of someone who believes the people she loves are safe. We ordered wine. We talked about the trip we'd been loosely planning to Portugal. Then, almost casually, she brought it up again. I've been thinking, she said, maybe we shouldn't give up on the fertility treatments just yet. I looked at her. She continued, completely unaware of what I already knew. Someone at work recommended a new specialist. Apparently, he's one of the best in the state. Maybe we should book a consultation. For a moment, I couldn't answer. I just stared at the woman sitting across from me, the woman who had secretly made sure I would never become a father, and listened as she talked about trying again. She spoke about hope, about possibilities, about not giving up. All while knowing that every morning she swallowed a pill designed to make certain none of it could ever happen. I realized then that the greatest lie wasn't hidden in a blister pack. It was sitting across the table from me, smiling. I looked at her across the table. I thought about that Tuesday afternoon 4 years ago, and her hand gripping mine, and the tears that had been so convincing. And then I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I placed the birth control blister pack on the white tablecloth between us. Then the pharmacy records, 12 months of them, paper-clipped, dated. Then the prescription history. Then the divorce papers. The restaurant was full and softly lit and quietly humming around us. Rosalie looked at the items on the table, and the color left her face so completely that I instinctively reached forward, some reflex of 10 years, before I stopped myself. She looked up at me. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then the tears came. Not the performed tears of a fertility clinic, but something rawer and more broken. Something I had never seen from her before in 10 years. "Sterling, tell me the truth," I said. "All of it, right now. Whatever it is, tell me." She told me everything. She told me that she had grown up in a home where love was indistinguishable from damage. A father who raged and disappeared and returned and raged again. A mother who stayed because she believed she had no other choice. A childhood spent learning that family meant suffering. That bringing a child into the world meant condemning them to the same cycle she had never fully escaped. She told me that she had made a vow to herself at 17, standing in the kitchen of that house while her parents screamed in the room above her. She would never have children. She would never hand another human being the particular kind of pain she had grown up inside. She told me that when she met me, she had intended to tell me. But the longer we were together, the more she realized that becoming a father wasn't just something I wanted. It was the dream around which I had built my entire life. I talked about teaching our son to throw a baseball, about helping our daughter with homework, about family holidays and bedtime stories. Every time I spoke about the future, she saw how much it meant to me. She knew that if she admitted she never wanted children, she would almost certainly lose me. So instead of telling the truth, she chose silence. She told me that she had written the conversation out in her head 100 times during the first months of our relationship. Every time she came close, the terror of losing me overcame the obligation to tell the truth. She told me that she had told herself she would confess before the wedding. Then after. Then on our first anniversary. Then when it felt like the right moment, which never came, because the right moment was always one more year away. She told me that her mother had known from the beginning, had warned her repeatedly that honesty would cost her the marriage, had helped her believe that protecting the lie was the same as protecting me. She told me that she had loved me every single day of our marriage without exception, and that she was sorry, that she had always known she would be. When she finished, the restaurant had grown quieter around us. The candles had burned lower. She was sitting with her hands flat on the table, very still, like someone waiting to be sentenced. I looked at her for a long time. I did not raise my voice. Not once. That is the thing I am most certain of when I look back, that I never raised my voice. Because what I felt in that moment was not the kind of rage that rises and breaks things. It was the kind that settles, that takes up permanent residence somewhere behind your sternum and doesn't move. "I believe you," I said. "I believe that you were afraid. I believe that you loved me. I believe every word of what you just told me." I slid the divorce papers across the table. "And none of it changes what you chose." I paused. "If you had trusted me with the truth, we might have lost our marriage. But by lying, you stole 10 years of my life. You made that decision for me." I looked at her one last time, and I never got a vote. The words hung between us. She was shaking. I could see it. Then I stood up, laid enough cash on the table to cover dinner and the wine, put on my coat, and walked out into the cold October air. I didn't look back. Not because I didn't love her, but because I had spent 10 years looking at her and not seeing clearly. And I was done. The divorce was finalized the following spring. I won't pretend the months between were clean or painless. They weren't. There were nights I sat in the apartment we had chosen together and felt the silence of it like a physical weight. There were mornings I reached for my phone to call her before I remembered why I couldn't. Grief doesn't follow logic. It doesn't care about who was right. I moved to a smaller place on the other side of the city. I took only what was mine. Books, clothes, the record player I'd had since college. I left the furniture. I left the photographs on the walls. I left everything that belonged to the version of my life I was done living. I went to therapy. I want to say that plainly, without decoration, because it matters. I went to therapy, and it was the most important thing I did in the year that followed. Not because it fixed anything, but because it gave me a room where I was allowed to say what I actually felt without managing it for anyone else's comfort. What I felt was grief, mostly. Not only for the children, but the man I had been, the one who trusted so completely and was so completely wrong, for the decade of hope that had been constructed on a foundation that never existed, for the version of Rosalie I had loved, who had been real in every way except the one that mattered most. I learned slowly that grief and clarity can coexist. That you can mourn something and still know, without ambiguity, that leaving it was right. I learned something else too. I learned that the desire to become a father had not been conditional on Rosalie. I had spent so many years attaching that longing to our marriage, to our shared future, that I had forgotten it was mine, separate from her, predating her, belonging entirely to me. It was still there. 3 years after I signed those papers, I met a woman named Callie at a mutual friend's dinner party in the kind of low-stakes, completely ordinary way that you never see coming. We talked for 4 hours without noticing the time. On our third date, I told her, not as a warning, but as a truth about myself, that having children was something I had always wanted and had not given up on. She looked at me across the table and said simply, "So have I." Our daughter was born on a Wednesday morning in early April. The delivery room was bright and cold, and I was holding Callie's hand, and then, without any transition I can accurately describe, I was holding our daughter. She weighed 7 pounds and 4 ounces, and she had Callie's mouth and my father's ears, and she looked up at me with the unfocused, absolute attention of someone who has just arrived somewhere entirely new. I had prayed for that moment for more than a decade. Standing there, I understood something I hadn't been able to reach before. This moment had always been waiting for me. It had been waiting on the other side of the lie. I don't know if Rosalie knows about my daughter. We have had no contact since the divorce was finalized. I don't think about her often, not with anger, not with longing. Occasionally something will surface a memory, and I'll feel the ghost of what we were, and then it passes. But I have thought about what I would say to her, if I ever had the occasion. Not to wound her. Not to reopen what is closed. Just this: the truth you were too afraid to tell me was the only thing that could have set us both free. She might have lost me when she said it, but I would have had the chance to grieve honestly, to choose deliberately, to build my life with my eyes open. And she would have had what she never actually had, a man who stayed because he knew the full truth and chose her anyway. Instead, she kept me for 10 years by keeping me blind. And she lost me the moment I could finally see. If you've carried a secret because you were afraid the truth would cost you everything, know this: the lie will cost you more. It always does. It just waits longer to collect. If you made it this far, I want to hear your opinion. Could you forgive someone who lied to you for 10 years about something this important? Or would you have walked away like Sterling? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy stories that stay with you long after they end, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.